I flinched at the sharp ringing of the alarm clock. 6:30. The habit of waking up early had been ingrained in me over decades of work, and it hadn't gone away even 3 months after I'd retired. But now that there was no rush, those early wake-ups were pointless and only stretched out the endless, monotonous days. Fumbling for my slippers, I slowly got out of bed. My knees ached. It had drizzled all day yesterday, and my joints responded to every change in the weather. Kalispell had never been a city of bright sunshine, but in the fall, the grayness was especially oppressive. In the kitchen, I put the kettle on and pulled out a box of pills: heart pills, blood pressure pills, vitamins. Lining them up, I mechanically took one after another. I used to eat breakfast on the run when I worked, but now even this little thing had become a ritual that took an inordinate amount of time. I opened the refrigerator. The half-empty shelves were an eloquent reminder of the need to save money. My last trip to the store had been a week ago, and I had carefully counted every penny at the checkout counter. My pension was frustratingly small, especially after 30 years of working as a call center operator for an insurance company. After spreading a thin layer of jam on my toast, I sat down at the kitchen table and unfolded yesterday's newspaper. I wasn't used to reading the news on the internet, even though I had a smartphone my grandchildren had given me last Christmas. As I flipped through the pages of the paper, my eyes stopped on the job section. Almost unconsciously, I started looking through the ads, noting in my mind the ones that might suit me. But who would want a 67-year-old woman with no special skills? After I finished my breakfast, I washed the dishes out of habit, even though there was only a cup and a plate in the sink. There wasn't much to do, and it was going to be a long day ahead. I decided to bake cookies for my grandchildren, even though the last time I'd seen them was almost a month ago. Edwin rarely brought them to see me, always making excuses. The kids were busy with school or sports practice or homework. As I kneaded the dough, I caught myself counting the costs again. Oil has gone up, flour too. If this keeps up, I'll have to give up even something as small as home baking for my grandchildren. The thought of that caused a dull ache somewhere in my chest. Placing the cookies on the baking tray, I turned on the oven and looked at the clock. It was only 10 in the morning, still a whole day ahead of me. I went to the window and pulled back the curtain. It had stopped raining, but the sky was still low and gray. Cars drove down the street, people hurrying to work, going about their business. And I stood in my little house, the one I'd inherited after my divorce, feeling disconnected from life. A phone call broke the silence, making me flinch. My son's name popped up on the screen. "Hello, Edwin," I said, trying to hide the misplaced joy in my voice. "Hi, Mom." His voice sounded strained. "Are you home?" "Yes, of course I am." "I'll stop by in an hour. I need to talk to you." He disconnected without waiting for an answer. I stood, still holding the phone to my ear. Edwin's calls never boded well, but I was still excited to see him. The last time we'd seen each other was 3 weeks ago, when he'd stopped by for 15 minutes to pick up his old books from the garage. I rushed to clean up, even though the house was already clean. I took cookies out of the oven and made fresh tea. Edwin didn't like raisin cookies, but I baked a batch with chocolate chips just for him. The doorbell rang exactly 1 hour later. Edwin stood on the doorstep, frowning and tense. Despite his good salary, he always dressed simply. Jeans, sweater, jacket. Tall like his father, with the same sharp features and direct gaze. Only my hair was mine. Brown, with a slight redness, though now the gray was showing through at the temples. "Come on in, I just baked some cookies," I said, letting him in. "I won't be long." He walked into the living room without taking off his jacket. "I have lunch in 40 minutes. I brought tea and cookies and set them out on the coffee table. Edwin sat on the edge of the couch, tapping his fingers on his knee, a gesture I remembered all too well. His father used to do the same thing when he was unhappy. "How are the kids?" I asked, sitting down in the chair across from him. "How's Pamela?" "They're fine," he said. "Look, Mom, it's business. There's a situation here." He paused, searching for words. I waited, already sensing something unpleasant. "Pamela and I did some math on your expenses," he continued. "Your rent is going up, your groceries are going up. Your pension is a little tight, isn't it?" I felt the color flooding over my face. So Edwin and his wife had discussed my finances. Did they really think I would ask them for money? I'm doing fine, I answered dryly. Come on, Mom. I can see you're barely making ends meet. Pamela says you've even stopped buying those herbal teas you like. I didn't say a word. Indeed, I had to give up a lot of little things that used to be available. But I didn't complain, neither to him nor to my sister-in-law. We thought, Edwin continued, that you should work again. Work? I couldn't hide my surprise. I'm 67, Edwin. Who needs me? Actually, there's a vacancy for an office administrator at our company. It's no big deal. Answering phones, greeting clients, sorting mail. I think you can handle it. I kept quiet, digesting what I'd heard. On the one hand, I could use the extra money. On the other hand, after 30 years of work, I dreamed of a well-deserved vacation. Edwin, I'm not sure. Look, he interrupted me abruptly. I'm not going to feed an extra mouth, okay? I've got a family of my own, a mortgage, kids growing up. Pamela wants a new car. I can't be helping you out, too. My son's words hit me like a slap in the face. An extra mouth. That's what I'd become to him. A burden. An extra mouth. I remembered breastfeeding him, staying up nights when he was sick, working overtime to pay for his college. I never asked you for money. My voice shook with resentment. What, are you expecting a medal for that? He grimaced. Mom, let's not be dramatic. Just go to the interview. I've already arranged with our HR, you'll be accepted. The salary isn't much, but with the pension together, it'll be enough for a normal life. I kept silent, looking at his face, so much like my father's. The same hard crease at his lips, the same cold stare. It was like the past had come back and I was sitting across from my husband again, listening to his reproaches. The interview is tomorrow at 10. Edwin stood up. I'll text you the address and wear something decent, not your grandmother's outfits. He left without touching the cookies I'd baked for him. I sat in the chair, feeling tears running down my cheeks. An extra mouthful. Was this really what I had become for my only son? In the evening, I pulled an old photo album out of the closet. There's Edwin, small, smiling, with a gap between his front teeth. Here he is walking to first grade, clutching my hand tightly. And here is his graduation. He is already serious, in a suit, looking at the camera with a slight superiority. When did he get so cold? Maybe his father's genes were stronger than my love. I turned the page and saw our wedding photo, of me young with long hair in a simple white dress, and next to me was Brian, tall, handsome, with a cocky smile. At the time, I didn't know what was behind that smile. Brian seemed like the perfect man when he wooed me. Flowers, compliments, caring. But after we got married, things changed. At first, it was petty nagging about my cooking, my clothes, the way I spoke. Then the scandals began, over money, over the fact that I was allegedly flirting with a neighbor, over every little thing. I put up with it for Edwin's sake. I didn't want him to grow up without a father. And when my son turned 15, Brian left for a young colleague from his office. The divorce was hard. Brian didn't want to divide the property, tried to sue for the house we bought with my parents' money. But the court sided with me. The house was left to me, and Edwin, who was already in college at the time, didn't care. He didn't blame his father for leaving the family. On the contrary, he visited him more often than he visited me. I slammed the album shut and put it back in the closet. You can't fix the past, but you can try to fix the present. Maybe this job wasn't such a bad idea. At least I'd be around people instead of sitting in an empty house all day. And I'd be able to pay my own bills without the humiliation of being a burden to my son. This morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I stood in front of my closet for a long time, picking out clothes. It had been a long time since I'd been on a job interview, not since I'd started working for an insurance company 30 years ago. I settled on the navy blue suit I wore to corporate meetings. It was a little loose. I'd lost weight over the last year because of the constant saving on groceries. But overall, it looked decent. As I packed, I thought about Edwin's words. Extra mouth. How could he say that? I'd never been a burden to him. Even after my divorce from Brian, I'd paid for his college on my own, even though I had to work a part-time job. I didn't ask him for help now. I just wanted to see him and my grandchildren more often. When did he get so callous? Before I left, I looked in the mirror. Wrinkles around his eyes, gray strands in his brown hair. But the look was still the same, stubborn as Brian said. Well, that stubbornness would help me get through the interview and get the job. not for Edwin's sake, but for my own. The TechnoSafe office was in a glass building on the outskirts of Kalispell. From a distance, I noticed the modern backlit sign and swallowed nervously. My last 30 years had been spent in an old brick insurance building with cracked plaster and creaky floors. That gleaming glass cube seemed alien and unwelcoming to me. I adjusted the collar of my blouse and took one last look at my reflection in the dark glass of the parked car. Did I look presentable enough? Was the gray in my hair too noticeable? Did the powder hide the wrinkles? Pulling on my jacket, I took a deep breath and headed for the entrance. The glass doors slid open automatically in front of me. The spacious lobby was cool and smelled fresh, like a sea breeze. Behind the reception desk sat a young girl with perfectly styled blonde hair. She was talking on the phone with her shoulder to her ear while typing something quickly on the computer. When she noticed me, she smiled and gestured that she would be free soon. I looked around. Everything around me was modern, minimalist, and somehow cold. White walls, gray floor, glass partitions. On the walls were abstract paintings in austere frames. In the corner of the hall stood an aquarium with tropical fish, the only bright spot in this monochrome kingdom. "Hello, can I help you?" The girl had finished talking and was now looking at me with a professional smile. "Good morning. My name is Miriam Holt, and I have an interview scheduled for the office administrator position." "Yes, of course." She checked her computer. "You're expected in human resources. Please take the elevator to the third floor and turn right. There will be a sign that says HR. I thanked and headed for the elevator, trying to walk confidently, even though my knees were trembling. There was a mirror in the elevator, and I examined myself meticulously again. The navy blue suit that had fit so snugly before was now a little loose. I had to pin the skirt at the waist. Ivory blouse, pearl earrings, a gift from my parents for my 18th birthday. Nothing modern, but I looked neat and solid. The personnel department greeted me with the quiet hum of voices and the clatter of keyboards. A young man sitting at the nearest desk raised his head from the monitor. "Are you here for an interview?" "Yes, Miriam Holt." "Oh, yes, we're waiting for you." He stood up and extended his hand. "Brandon Perry, HR specialist. Let's go to the conference room." I shook his hand, dry and cool, and followed him down the hall. Brandon looked very young, barely in his 20s. His dark hair was neatly trimmed, his thin-rimmed glasses fashionable, his suit austere. He moved quickly and easily, and I had to quicken my step to keep up. The meeting room was a small room with an oval table and a few chairs. One wall was completely glass, giving me a view of the city and the mountains in the distance. At another time, I would have marveled at the view, but right now I wasn't. My nerves were stretched to the limit. "Have a seat," Brandon pointed to a chair. "I'll ask you a few questions first, and then Mr. Talmadge, our director, will be here. He personally conducts the final interviews with all the candidates." I nodded, trying to hide my surprise. A company director would be interviewing a regular receptionist? That seemed odd. Maybe Edwin had asked him to give me special attention. Although, knowing my son, I doubted he'd ask for that. Brandon opened the file folder. "So, Mrs. Holt, tell me a little bit about your work experience." I started talking about my career in insurance. 30 years in one place, an operator in a call center, then a senior operator, then a small group supervisor. Brandon nodded, making notes, but I could tell by the look on his face that my experience wasn't very impressive. "Why did you decide to change careers?" he asked, not looking up from his papers. I hesitated. I couldn't tell him that my son thought I was a mouthful and wanted me to earn my own living, could I? "I recently retired, but I realized that I'm not ready to stay at home. I want to be useful, to communicate with people. Besides, I could use the extra income." Brandon nodded again and asked a few more standard questions about my skills, strengths, weaknesses, and willingness to learn. I answered honestly, trying not to embellish, but not to belittle my abilities either. "Yes, I'm not an expert in modern technology, but I'm a fast learner. Yes, it will take me time to get used to the new place, but I am responsible and efficient." In the middle of the interview, the door opened, and a tall man in his 60s with a neatly trimmed gray beard and shrewd gray eyes entered the meeting room. He was dressed in a dark gray suit, an off-white shirt, and a deep blue tie. Something about his appearance seemed vaguely familiar, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. "Good afternoon." His voice was low and soft. "I'm Rowan Talmadge, director of the company. He held out his hand to me, and when our palms touched, I felt a slight tingle, like static electricity. Rowan held my hand in his a little longer than the rules of propriety required, scrutinizing my face. Miriam Holt, I introduced myself, though he probably already knew who I was. It's a pleasure. He finally released my hand and sat down in the chair across from me. Brandon, have you found out everything you need to know? Yes, sir, the young man nodded. I've just finished the basic questions. Good. Rowan looked at me with a slight smile. Mrs. Holt, your son Edwin is one of our valued employees. He mentioned that you could take the position of office administrator. So Edwin put in a good word for me after all. Strange, considering his attitude yesterday. Yes, he told me about the vacancy, I answered cautiously. Tell me about yourself, Rowan asked, leaning back in his chair. Not about the job. Brandon had already found out everything he needed to know. About you as a person. What are your hobbies? What do you like? What's important to you in life? I was confused. You don't usually ask questions like that in a job interview. Or had the world changed while I was working at the same company? Yeah, I started and stammered. To be honest, I've been too busy working and taking care of my family to have any serious hobbies in recent years. And before? Rowan kept up. When I was young, for example, I wondered, why would he be interested? And why did his face seem so familiar? I liked to draw in high school, I said finally. And reading. I dreamed of traveling, of seeing the world, but that's not how life turned out. Did you grow up here in Kalispell? Rowan asked, keeping his gaze on me. Yes, I was born and raised here. I went to North High School. Something flashed in his eyes, recognition, interest, but it was gone. North High, he repeated thoughtfully. Interesting. I went there for a while too, but then my family moved, and I graduated in another town. So that's it. Maybe we were classmates? Or just went to the same school at different times? That would explain why his face seemed familiar, but I couldn't remember anyone named Rowan. When did you go to school there? I asked curiously. Oh, it was a long time ago. He smiled, but didn't answer directly. Tell me, Miriam, are you good with people? The sudden change of subject puzzled me, but I didn't let it bother me. I guess I am. At the insurance company, I had to deal with all kinds of clients, including some very difficult ones. I learned to find an approach to almost everyone. That's an important skill for an office administrator, Rowan nodded. You will be the first person our clients see when they enter the office. Their first impression of the company depends on you. He asked a few more questions about my attitude to work, my willingness to learn new things, how I handle stress. These were all standard interview questions, but there was something unusual about the way he listened carefully to my answers, the way he looked at me with scrutiny. What do you know about our company? He asked when I had finished answering another question. Not much, to be honest, I admitted. I know that you deal with computer security and that my son works for you as a specialist in this field, but I don't know the details. Edwin doesn't like to talk about his work. Yes, it's a very specific business. Rowan nodded. We provide data protection for companies of all sizes, from small local firms to regional offices of large corporations. Being an office administrator doesn't require technical knowledge, but confidentiality is one of our core principles. You'll have to sign a non-disclosure agreement. I understand, I said. At the insurance company, we handled confidential client information too. Rowan nodded and looked at Brandon. Do you have any more questions? No, sir. I've already found out everything I need to know, he replied. Then please leave us alone for a moment, Rowan asked. Brandon collected the papers and left the meeting room. Rowan and I were left alone. He remained silent as he continued to study me with his gaze, and I felt uncomfortable under the scrutiny. Tell me, Miriam, he finally said, do you really want this job? Or are you only doing it because Edwin insists? The question took me by surprise. How did he know about our conversation with his son? I hesitated, not knowing how to answer. I didn't want to lie, but I didn't feel comfortable telling the truth. Edwin mentioned that you'd recently retired, but that you were struggling financially, Rowan explained, seeing my confusion. and that he'd suggested you try working for us. That was half the truth. He didn't mention the extra mouth and the reluctance to help his mother. Yes, that's true, I replied. My pension is really short, and sitting at home and counting pennies is not the most pleasant thing to do. I'm used to working, to being among people. The last few months have been difficult. Rowan nodded understandingly. Retirement is a serious challenge for an active person. Many people feel unwanted, thrown out of life. That's right. I was surprised by his understanding. It's like you've been written off, even though you're still full of energy and can be useful. I know the feeling. He smiled. I'm 65 too, and many of my peers are already enjoying a well-deserved vacation. But I can't imagine myself without work. I looked at him carefully. 65? He looked younger despite the gray hair, fit, energetic, with a lively look and a slight smile. Again, that elusive feeling that I knew him. Maybe we've met in the city. Kalispell isn't that big. Back to work, Rowan continued. Standard 9 to 5 schedule, 5 days a week. Salary. He quoted an amount that was higher than I expected. Plus health insurance and paid vacation. What do you think? Sounds pretty good, I answered honestly. With that salary plus my pension, I could not only pay my bills but save a little. Maybe even save up for that trip to Europe I'd been dreaming of all my life. Great, Rowan stood up. Congratulations, Miriam. Welcome to the TechnoSafe team. Brandon will prepare all the necessary paperwork and you can start work next Monday. Is that good enough for you? I stood up too, feeling a strange mixture of joy and bewilderment. Was it really that easy? No more interviews, no more tests, no more checks? Yes, of course, I said. But are you sure? I mean, my age, my lack of experience in your field? I'm absolutely sure, Rowan said firmly. You have a lot of life experience. You know how to communicate with people. You are responsible and disciplined. That's exactly what we need. He held out his hand to me again, and I shook it, still in disbelief at my good fortune. Thank you for your trust, I said. I promise you won't regret it. I know. He smiled that special smile again, the one that said he knew something about me that I didn't. I'll see you Monday, Miriam. As I walked out of the building, I took a deep breath of the cool fall air. Everything had happened so quickly and unexpectedly that I still couldn't comprehend what had happened. I have a job, and not a bad job, with a decent salary and normal conditions. I will no longer feel like a worthless pensioner sitting at home in four walls. But along with my joy, I felt a strange anxiety. Something about this interview was unusual. Why was the director of the company personally interviewing a candidate for such an ordinary position? Why was he scrutinizing me so closely? And most importantly, why did he seem so familiar to me? On the way home, I tried to remember where I might have seen him. Maybe he was a customer of an insurance company. Or had we crossed paths at some city event? Or did he say we went to the same high school? North High School. I've been going over the faces of classmates, teachers, kids from the same grade. No, I didn't remember anyone named Rowan. Even though it had been almost 50 years, my memory might have failed me. At home, the first thing I did was call Edwin to tell him the news. He didn't pick up, so I left a message on the answering machine. Then I made tea and sat by the window, looking out at the falling leaves in the garden. Tomorrow, I would have to go shopping, to buy something suitable for the office. My closet hadn't been updated for a long time, and I didn't want to show up at my new job in old clothes. My thoughts went back to Rowan Tallmadge. There was something special about the way he'd looked at me, the way he'd asked me questions, like he was looking for confirmation of some hunch he'd made. And that thing he said about North High School. Why did he even ask where I went to high school? Interviews usually ask about colleges, not schools. The phone rang, interrupting my musings. It was Edwin. Hi, Mom. His voice sounded strained. I got your message. So, did you get the interview? Yes, I answered, trying to hide my joy. Minus Mr. Tallmadge offered me the job. I start on Monday. Tallmadge interviewed you? There was surprise in his son's voice and something else. Anxiety? Yes, he interviewed me very kindly, I said. By the way, he mentioned that he went to North High School like me. Do you know when exactly? I think I've seen him somewhere before. There was a pause on the line. I have no idea, Edwin said. Look, Mom, I gotta go. I'll call you later. He disconnected, leaving me puzzled. What was wrong with him? He offered me the job and now he's acting weird. I put the phone away and stared out the window again. My inner voice told me there was something unusual about this job story. Rowan Talmadge clearly knew more about me than he was letting on. And there was something Edwin wasn't telling me too. But anyway, I had a job now. A fresh start at 67. Who would have thought it? I smiled at my thoughts and took a sip of tea. Whatever was behind this unexpected twist of fate, I was up for the challenge. Monday morning was clear and cold. The frost was silvery on the grass, and the low autumn sun painted the treetops golden. I woke up an hour before my alarm clock, too excited to sleep. First day of work in a new place, the first work day in 30 years, not in the familiar office of an insurance company. It took me a long time to choose what to wear. On Friday after the interview, I spent some of the money I had set aside for a rainy day and bought a new suit, a dark maroon suit with a straight knee-length skirt and a fitted jacket. To it, a cream blouse and low shoes on a wide heel. Looking at myself in the mirror, I was satisfied. I looked solid but not old-fashioned. Over breakfast, I went over in my head all the possible scenarios for the first day. Who's going to bring me up to speed? Would I be introduced to all the employees? Would I be able to handle my new responsibilities? And what if I didn't? What if Rowan Talmadge is disappointed in his choice? These thoughts swirled in my head all the way to the office. The day promised to be sunny but cool. Golden autumn is my favorite time of year. Once upon a time in my youth, I loved to paint autumn landscapes. I wonder if that skill is still intact. Maybe I should buy some paints and give it a try. TechnoSafe no longer seemed so alien and unfriendly as on the day of the interview. I walked through the glass doors feeling like I was starting a new chapter of my life. Behind the reception desk sat the same blonde-haired girl. She smiled at me. "Good morning, you must be Miriam Holt. I'm Ashley, the administrative assistant. I'll be bringing you up to speed." I shook her outstretched hand, noting the firm handshake and genuine smile. Ashley looked very young, probably fresh out of college. "It's a pleasure, Ashley. I hope I'll settle in quickly." "Don't worry, it's not as hard as it looks," she assured me. "Come on, I'll show you around my desk and tell you what I'm supposed to do." My desk was next to the reception desk, a convenient place to see everyone coming and going. A computer, a phone with multiple lines, and neat stacks of papers, folders, and office supplies. "This is your computer." Ashley turned on the monitor. "The password is temporary, but you can change it later. The basic program is very simple. You register visitors here, incoming mail here, and outgoing mail here. Here is a calendar of meetings and appointments." She showed me how to use all the functions of the program, how to answer calls and transfer them to the right employees, how to meet visitors. Everything was quite simple and logical. "The most important thing is confidentiality," Ashley emphasized. "We have clients who don't want to publicize that they are using cybersecurity services. Some people prefer to meet outside the office. Information about who's visiting who is kept strictly confidential." I nodded, realizing the seriousness of the question. At the insurance company, we also kept client data strictly confidential. "Where does my son work?" I asked out of curiosity. "Edwin Holt. He is a cybersecurity specialist." "Oh, Edwin!" Ashley smiled. "His office is on the 4th floor, in the technical department. He rarely comes down here, mostly working with clients in the field. I haven't seen my son since that phone call after the interview. He hadn't returned my texts all weekend, and I was starting to worry. Maybe I should go up and say hi to him." But Ashley was already leading me around the office, introducing me to the other employees. Most were young, under 35, and I felt old among them. But everyone was polite and friendly. No one looked dismissive or pitying, which I secretly feared. By noon, my head was full of new information and the names of the staff were confusing. I wrote everything down in a notebook so I wouldn't forget and diligently followed Ashley's instructions. The phone was ringing almost constantly, and there were a few visitors who needed to be checked in and escorted to the right office. "You're doing a great job," Ashley encouraged me during my lunch break. "A lot of newcomers get lost with all the information flow." "Thank you." I was grateful for the encouragement. I just try to write everything down so I don't forget. We sat in a small cafeteria on the 1st floor of the building. I had brought lunch from home, a turkey sandwich and an apple, and Ashley had gotten a salad from the cafeteria. "Tell me about yourself," she asked, forkful of lettuce. "How did you come to work for us?" I hesitated, not knowing how much to say. Finally, I decided to stick to the same story I'd told at the interview. I'd recently retired, but I realized I wasn't ready to stay at home. I want to be among people, to feel useful. Besides, an extra income never hurts. "How long has your son been working here?" Ashley asked. "5 years, as far as I know," I said. Edwin doesn't talk much about his work, though. I was about to add something else, but Edwin walked into the cafeteria. When he saw me, he froze for a moment, then walked briskly toward our table. "Mom," his voice sounded strained. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I apologized to Ashley and stepped back into the corner of the cafeteria with my son. "What are you doing here?" he asked, lowering his voice but not hiding his annoyance. "What do you mean?" I was surprised. "Today is my first day on the job. I told you on Friday." "I thought you'd change your mind." He looked disgruntled. "Look, Mom, it's not a good idea. Working for the same company. It creates some complications." "What kind of complications?" "I don't understand. You offered me the job. You said you didn't want to feed an extra mouth, remember?" Edwin grinned as if he had a toothache. "Yes, but I didn't think Talmadge would actually hire you. He usually has 3 or 4 interviews with candidates." "Well, I guess I made a good impression," I said, starting to get angry. "What's the problem, Edwin? You're the one who wanted me to work. Now I have a job. Isn't that what you wanted?" "It's just," he hesitated. "I don't want my coworkers to know you're my mother. It might look like I'm begging for your job." I felt my cheeks flush. Is he ashamed of me? Ashamed of his own mother? "Don't worry," I said coldly. "I won't tell everyone I'm your mother. And I won't bother you at work at all." "Mom, that's not what I meant," Edwin started, but he was interrupted by a voice from the speaker. "Edwin Holt, come to the principal's office." He flinched and looked at his watch. "Damn, Talmadge wants to see me. I'll talk to you later." Edwin walked quickly out of the cafeteria, and I walked back to the table where Ashley was waiting. "Is everything okay?" she asked worriedly. "Yeah, just family stuff." I tried to smile, but it wasn't very convincing. After lunch, I got back to work. I answered phones, registered visitors, and sorted through mail. Ashley showed me how to use the copier and scanner, how to order stationery and supplies. Time flew by, and soon the day was over. "That's it for today," Ashley said as she turned off her computer. "You did a great job on the first day, Miriam." "Thanks for your help," I said sincerely. "Without you, I would have been a mess." I was already packing my things when I saw Edwin coming down the stairs. His face was pale, and his eyes were lightning fast. When he saw me, he changed direction abruptly and walked over to my desk. "We need to talk," he said, trying to keep his voice low, but I could hear the ill-contained rage in his voice. "Sure," I looked at Ashley. "See you tomorrow?" She nodded, throwing a quick glance at Edwin, and walked out of the office. We were alone. The last of the employees had already left. "What happened?" I asked, though I could tell by the look on his face that something serious had happened. "What happened?" Edwin almost hissed. "Talmadge fired me. That's what happened." I stared at my son, stunned, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Fired you? But why?" "You don't know." He came closer, his face contorted with anger. "You set the whole thing up, didn't you? You seduced the old man to get rid of me." "What?" I took a step back, shocked by his words. "What are you talking about? I didn't seduce anyone. Don't pretend you don't understand." Edwin raised his voice. "Talmadge said he heard me talking to you in the cafeteria, that I was disrespectful to my mother, that such a person couldn't work for his company." I was silent, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. Rowan Talmadge had fired Edwin because of the way he talked to me? It seemed unbelievable. "Edwin, I swear I didn't know anything," I said, "and I certainly didn't seduce anyone. Mr. Talmadge was just being involved." "Involvement?" Edwin laughed bitterly. "A 50-year-old bachelor suddenly taking an interest in an old woman he'd only seen once in his life? Don't make me laugh, Mom. You told him something about me, didn't you?" "No." I was indignant at his accusations. "I didn't talk about you at all in the interview. I certainly didn't say anything bad. Then why did he fire me? Edwin persisted. 5 years of perfect work, and suddenly he fired me because of a private conversation with my mother. How do you explain that? I didn't know what to say. The whole situation seemed absurd. Did Rowan Talmadge really fire Edwin just because he overheard our conversation in the cafeteria? It seemed strange to even the most principled employer. Maybe you misunderstood something? I suggested. Maybe there were other reasons? He bluntly said it was because of the way I talked to you. Edwin slammed his fist on the table. And you know what else? He offered me 3 months' salary as severance pay. It's like he's buying me off. What did you tell him? I didn't tell him anything. I was getting impatient, too. Stop blaming me for all your problems, Edwin. I didn't ask you to come to me with this job offer. I didn't ask you to tell me you didn't want to feed an extra mouth. And I certainly didn't ask Mr. Talmadge to fire you. Edwin looked at me as if he was seeing me for the first time. I rarely raise my voice, especially to him. All my life, I'd tried to be the perfect mother. Supportive, understanding, willing to do anything for my son. But now the cup of my patience is overflowing. I don't know what's going on between you and Talmadge, Edwin said in a calmer voice, but with no less venom in his voice. But I'm sure you had something to do with my dismissal. And I won't forget it, Mother. I won't. He turned and walked briskly toward the exit. I stood there, stunned by his words and the whole situation. How had my first day on the job ended up being such a nightmare? Miriam? Rowan Talmadge's voice made me flinch. I turned around and saw him standing in the doorway of my office. Could I talk to you for a minute? I nodded mechanically and followed him in. The principal's office was spacious, with large floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains, dark wood furniture, minimal decorations, and a perfectly organized desk. Have a seat, Rowan pointed to the visitor's chair. I think we need to talk. I sat down feeling my knees shake. What if Edwin was right, and Rowan Talmadge had some kind of agenda for me? What if he really did fire my son because of me? I heard your conversation with your son, Rowan said, sitting down across from me. I apologize for that. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but your voices were pretty loud. I was silent, not knowing what to say. Rowan continued. I want to make it clear right away. I didn't fire Edwin because he spoke disrespectfully to you. I mean, that played a role too, but it wasn't the main reason. What was the main reason? I asked, still not understanding. Rowan sighed and leaned back in his chair. You see, Miriam, your son is a very good technician. But lately we've been having problems with his attitude toward his coworkers and customers. 3 complaints in the last month is a lot for even the most brilliant technician. I was going to have a serious talk with him and give him a final warning. But when I heard him talking to you, that was the last straw. I listened carefully, trying to see if he was telling the truth. His words sounded sincere, but something told me that wasn't the whole story. Why did you hire me? I asked him directly. Really, why? It's not like you even checked my references. Rowan smiled softly, almost sadly. Because I know you, Miriam. I've known you a lot longer than you think. I frowned, trying to figure out what he was talking about. Have we met before? I don't remember. North High School, he said. 1974th year. Mr. Harrison's class. I felt my pulse quicken. 1974. I was 16 in my junior year. Mr. Harrison taught English literature. But, I tried to remember my classmates. I don't remember anyone named Rowan. My name was Robert then, he said. Robert Avery. I became Rowan later, when I took my grandfather's middle name and my mother's last name. She insisted on it after my parents divorced. Robert Avery? The memories came suddenly. A tall, thin guy with a mop of dark hair and a serious look. We sat next to each other in Mr. Harrison's class. He was always the first to raise his hand when the teacher asked a tough question. We were working on a project together on The Great Gatsby. Bob? I hesitantly said the childhood nickname my classmates called him. He nodded and his eyes lit up. Yes, Mary. Bob Avery. Mary? No one but him had ever called me that. It was his special nickname for me when we started dating in the spring of '74. Our brief romance ended the summer his family moved to another state. It can't be, I whispered, looking up into his face. I saw familiar features now, the same gray eyes, the same cut of his lips, the same dimple on his chin. It was just that wrinkles, gray hair, and time had changed him beyond recognition. Bob, is that really you? It's me, he smiled. I wasn't sure you'd remember. It's been so many years. Why didn't you tell me right away? I asked, still not believing what was happening. I wanted to make sure it was you. People change, Miri. You've changed. I've changed. But when I saw you at the interview, something in your eyes was still the same. Something I've remembered all these years. I was silent, digesting his words. Bob Avery, my first love. The first guy who asked me out. The first kiss. The first heartbreak when he left. We wrote each other letters for a couple months, then we stopped texting. I went to college, met Brian, got married. Life moved on. And you remembered me all this time? I asked incredulously. Not just remembered. His voice grew quieter. I searched. When I came back to Kalispell 15 years ago, I tried to find you, but you were already married with a different last name. And then I saw Edwin Holt's resume and noticed his mother was Miriam. Not the most common name. I was hoping it was you, but I wasn't sure. When he offered you the receptionist position, I couldn't believe my luck. So you hired me just because we knew each other in high school? I was still trying to make sense of the situation. Not only that, Rowan replied seriously. You're really the right person for the job. You have a lot of experience working with people. You're responsible, organized. It's just, let's call it a happy coincidence. I stared at him, trying to match the image of 16-year-old Bob with this confident businessman. The Bob I remembered was shy, immersed in books, a little clumsy. This Rowan radiated quiet strength and confidence. And Edwin? I asked. Did you fire him because of me? No, Rowan answered firmly. I fired him because he didn't fit our company values. The way he talked to you, his mother, the woman who raised him and gave him an education, it shows his true character. And I don't want to work with people like that, no matter how good they are. I remembered Edwin's words, his accusation that I had seduced his boss. How far from the truth that was, and how painful that my own son could think such a thing. He accused me of I couldn't finish the sentence. I heard that. Rowan shook his head. I'm sorry he's talking to you like that. No one deserves to be treated like that, especially by their own children. I felt tears come to my eyes. The whole day had been too much. The new job, Edwin getting fired, his accusations, and now this incredible revelation that my new boss is my first love from high school. I don't know what to say, I admitted. You don't need to say anything, Rowan replied softly. Just know that your job here has nothing to do with Edwin. You've earned this place on your own, by your own experience and qualities. And our past, well, that's just a nice bonus, for me at least. He smiled, and in his smile, I saw an echo of the boy I'd known 50 years ago. The one who'd written me poems in the margins of my literature notebook. The one who had given me my first bouquet of wildflowers. The one I had once loved with all the heart of a 16-year-old girl. For me, too, I answered quietly, and for the first time in a long time, I felt my lips curl into a genuine smile. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. September turned to October and then to November. The leaves on the trees turned yellow and fell, revealing black branches against the gray sky. Morning frost became commonplace, and in the evenings I turned up the heat in my small house more and more often. The first few weeks at my new job weren't as difficult as I'd feared. Ashley patiently explained the ins and outs of the job, and the rest of the staff was sympathetic to my inevitable mistakes. Gradually, I became familiar with the computer program for registering visitors, learned how to quickly switch lines on the phone, and memorized the names of everyone in the company. You're a quick learner, Miriam, Ashley said to me one day when I accurately transferred a difficult call from an irate customer. It takes a lot of newcomers a lot longer to catch on. Her words warmed my soul. I was really trying my best, and it felt good to be noticed. After 30 years in one place, I was afraid that I would not be able to adapt to new conditions, that I would be a dinosaur among young, technically savvy employees. But my fears were in vain. In mid-October, Ashley announced that she was leaving. Her boyfriend had gotten a job in Seattle and she was moving in with him. I sincerely congratulated the girl, although inside I was scared. Who would be my support now? Who would help me if I was faced with a task I hadn't mastered yet? Don't worry, Ashley said, as if she'd read my mind. You've already learned everything. I even made you a little handout just in case. She handed me a neat folder with detailed instructions. On Ashley's last day of work, the staff threw her a farewell party. Everyone gathered in the conference room, drinking champagne, giving gifts, and wishing her luck in her new position. I also prepared a small present, a scarf that I knitted myself. Knitting was my longtime hobby, which I had almost forgotten about in recent years. But the news of Ashley's passing made me pull out my needles and yarn. The scarf was a soft, warm scarf in the soft blue colors that matched the girl's eyes. "It's so sweet, Miriam," Ashley exclaimed as she unwrapped the gift. "Did you knit it yourself? It's beautiful." I nodded in embarrassment, not expecting such a reaction. The other employees crowded around us, admiring my work. "You have a real talent," said Lindsay from accounting. "I'd pay good money for a scarf like that." "Me too." Natalie from marketing seconded her. "Have you thought about selling your products, Miriam?" I just laughed, dismissing their suggestions. What business is there at 67? But there was a pleasant warmth inside. I was valued here not only for my work, but for what I could do with my hands. After Ashley left, I was the only administrator in the office. It was a little scary at first, but I soon realized that I could handle all the responsibilities. Moreover, I was able to optimize some processes. For example, I developed a new system for sorting incoming mail, which saved time when distributing mail to departments. Rowan noticed my improvements and called me into his office one day. "Miriam, I've heard from the staff that you've implemented a new mail system," he said as I sat down across from him. "Tell me more about it." I explained the changes, a little embarrassed. What if he thought I was prying? "That's a great idea." Rowan nodded his approval. "That's exactly the kind of approach we need. Don't be afraid to suggest improvements if you see that something could be done more effectively." From that day on, I felt more confident. I started looking at other processes that could be optimized. I suggested a new format for weekly visitor reports, created an electronic database to store contacts of regular customers. These were all small improvements, but they made the work easier and more efficient. Colleagues came to me more and more often for advice, not only on administrative matters, but also on everyday matters. Young employees asked me how to better organize their time, how to cope with stress, how to establish relations with a difficult client. I answered based on my experience and saw that my words were appreciated. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly needed. The only shadow that overshadowed this new happy life was the breakdown in my relationship with Edwin. After he quit, we didn't speak. I tried calling several times, but he didn't pick up. Messages went unanswered. Finally, I decided to stop by his house on Saturday. Pamela, my sister-in-law, opened the door. She looked tense and awkward, avoiding looking me in the eye. "Hello, Pamela," I said. "Is Edwin home?" "No, he's at a job interview," she said, nervously tugging at the hem of her blouse. "Miriam, I'm sorry, but this isn't a good time for a visit." From behind her, I heard my grandson Jason's voice. "Mom, who's there?" "No one, honey," Pamela answered quickly. "Go finish your homework." I felt like I'd been hit in the butt. No one. That's what I'd become to my own family. No one. "Pamela," my voice shook. "Please let me at least see my grandchildren. I baked their favorite cookies." I held out the box of cookies I'd been baking all morning. Chocolate chip for Jason and peanut butter for Lisa. Pamela took the box with visible relief. It gave her an excuse to end the unpleasant conversation. "Thank you, I'll tell them. Edwin is very upset right now and he needs time. Please understand." "I understand," I said. Though I didn't really understand. How could my son blame me for his dismissal? How could he forbid me from seeing my grandchildren? "Tell him I called, and that I love him no matter what." Pamela nodded and closed the door. I stood on the porch, tears welling up in my eyes. All the way back home, I tried to make sense of what had happened. Was Edwin so hurt that he was willing to deprive me of my grandchildren? It was cruel, even for him. At home, I cried all evening, going through old photographs. Here was Jason, tiny, sleeping in my arms. Here's Lisa taking her first steps, holding onto my fingers. So many memories, so much love. And it's all forbidden now. On Monday, I came to work with eyes swollen from tears, although I tried to disguise it with makeup. But there was no escaping Rowan's scrutinizing gaze. "What's wrong?" he asked, stopping at my desk. "You look upset." "It's nothing serious," I tried to smile. "Just family stuff." "Edwin." He lowered his voice so the other employees wouldn't hear us. I nodded, unable to speak. Rowan sighed understandingly. "Come into my office this afternoon. We need to discuss the new reception system." I realized that this was just an excuse to talk privately. And indeed, when I arrived at his office at the appointed time, the conversation turned immediately to personal matters. "Tell me." Rowan motioned for me to sit in the chair. "What happened with Edwin?" And I told him about the unfortunate visit, about how they wouldn't let me in the house, how they called me nobody, how they wouldn't let me see my grandchildren. As I spoke, tears came to my eyes again, though I tried hard to hold them back. I'm so sorry, Miri." Rowan shook his head. "I didn't think he'd stoop to that. Using children as weapons is low." "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "Call a lawyer and demand the right to see my grandchildren? That would only exacerbate the conflict. But I can't leave things as they are. The kids aren't to blame for Edwin and me disagreeing." "Maybe we should give him some time to cool down," Rowan suggested. "He's angry now, but sooner or later he'll realize what he's doing is wrong, especially when the kids start asking about Grandma." I nodded, though I wasn't sure Edwin would come to his senses. I knew his stubbornness and vindictiveness all too well, traits I'd inherited from my father. "Would you like to go for a walk tonight?" Rowan suddenly suggested it. "The weather's supposed to be nice, and there's a fall festival at the lakefront park. It might take your mind off your sad thoughts." I hesitated. On the one hand, his offer seemed tempting. On the other hand, wouldn't it look like a date? And what would the staff think if they saw us together outside the office? "Don't worry about what other people will think," Rowan said, as if he'd read my mind. "We're two old friends who decided to take a walk and reminisce about our youth. There's nothing wrong with that." "Okay," I decided. "Let's go for a walk." It was indeed a lovely evening, cool but clear. The sky was filled with stars and the full moon glittered on the calm surface of the lake. Rowan and I walked slowly down the embankment, talking about everything. He talked about his life after leaving Kalispell, about college in Massachusetts, about his first job at a large IT company, about how he decided to start his own business. "Do you have a family?" I asked as we stopped at the parapet, looking at the twinkling lights across the lake. "I did," he sighed. "I married at 27 to a coworker of mine. We lived together for 15 years, but we didn't have children. Elizabeth wanted a career and then it was too late. We divorced when I was 42. I've lived alone ever since." "And you've never met anyone else?" I was surprised. "There were relationships, but nothing serious." He shrugged. "Work took up all my time, and then I came back to Kalispell and I thought about you a lot, Miri, about how your life turned out, whether you were happy." I looked away, not knowing what to say. Was I happy? That's a difficult question. There were moments of happiness. Edwin's birth, his first steps, his first success at school. There were hard times too. The scandals with Brian, his cheating, the humiliating divorce. There was a long, monotonous job at an insurance company, not unhappy but not very satisfying. "I've lived an ordinary life," she finally said, "like most people. Ups and downs, joys and sorrows. Nothing remarkable." "How did you meet Edwin's father?" Rowan asked. "In college, at a party." I smiled at the memory. Brian was flamboyant, confident, capable of making an impression. The complete opposite of me, the quiet, shy, small-town girl. He seemed so, special. I fell madly in love. "And then?" Rowan asked quietly. "And then it turned out that behind that bright facade was a different person." I sighed. "Controlling, selfish, incapable of real intimacy. But we had Edwin by then, and I'd put up with it for him. 15 years until Brian left me for someone else, young, bright, like I'd once been." Rowan was silent, listening to my story. Then he took my hand gently in his. "I'm sorry about what happened, Miri. You deserved better." His hand was warm and dry, and the touch made something inside me tingle. A long-forgotten feeling, like the thrill of youth. I didn't take my hand away, and we stood like that, staring at the lake, each of us absorbed in our own thoughts. And you? I asked at last. Why did you divorce Elizabeth? Rowan was silent for a moment, as if searching for words. We were too different. Elizabeth was ambitious, driven, and she put her career first. I worked hard too, but I always dreamed of a family, of children. Over time, we became just neighbors living under the same roof. And then she met her new boss, and, you know how it is. I nodded. Knew all too well. And you never wanted to start over? I asked. To meet someone? To start a family? I did. He turned to me. But I guess I hadn't met the right person. Or maybe he'd been looking for a ghost of the past all this time, the girl with the brown hair and the kindest eyes he'd known in his youth. I felt the color flood my cheeks. Had he remembered me all this time? Did he compare every woman he met to that 16-year-old girl? I'm not that girl anymore, Rowan, I said quietly. Time doesn't spare anyone. Looks change, he agreed. But the essence remains, and your eyes are still the same kind, intelligent with a spark of laughter in the corners. And your smile hasn't changed. And the way you bow your head when you listen attentively. It's all the same, Miri. His words touched me to the core. When was the last time someone said those things to me? Brian, even at the best of times, wasn't prone to romantic confessions. And in recent years, I'd never heard a compliment from a man at all. It was as if I'd become invisible after 60. You embarrass me, I admitted, lowering my gaze. I'm sorry, he smiled softly. I didn't mean to embarrass you. I'm just glad that we'd met again. That fate had given us a second chance at least for friendship. Friendship. Of course, what else could we talk about? We were both too old for romance. And yet something in his gaze, in the way he held my hand, told me he was hoping for more. I returned home with mixed feelings. On the one hand, the evening with Rowan had been wonderful. It had been a long time since I'd felt so alive, so desirable. Desirable. On the other, I was gnawing with guilt for Edwin. Was I betraying my son by getting close to the man who'd fired him? I tossed and turned all night, trying to sort out my feelings. I liked Rowan. I liked him a lot. He was attentive, intelligent, easy to be with, and interesting. But what would people say? What would the office think if they knew we were dating? And how would Edwin react if word got out? He's already accusing me of seducing the boss. What happens if he finds out we're actually getting closer? I arrived at work this morning, sleep-deprived and anxious. Rowan greeted me as usual as I passed the reception desk, but I could see the question in his eyes. Is everything okay? I forced out a smile, trying to show him I was fine. The day dragged on slowly. I answered the phone, registered visitors, sorted through the mail, all mechanically thinking about my situation. At lunchtime, I decided not to go to the cafeteria, but to have a sandwich at my desk. I didn't feel like talking to anyone. The phone rang as I was about to head back to work. The number was unfamiliar. Techno-safe reception, Miriam Holt speaking, I said in a professional tone. Grandma? The child's voice on the other end of the line made my heart jump. Jason? I couldn't believe my ears. Honey, is that you? Yes, Grandma, my grandson whispered. I'm calling from school at recess. Daddy took your number from Mom's phone, but I looked it up earlier and wrote it down. Jason. I felt tears coming to my eyes. How are you? How's Lisa? I missed you guys so much. We miss you too, Grandma. His voice shook. Daddy said you don't want to see us anymore, that you betrayed our family. But that's not true, is it? I gasped with indignation. How could Edwin say that to the children? How could he turn them against their own grandmother? Of course it's not true, sweetheart, I tried to say calmly. I love you and Lisa very much, and I want to see you. It's just that Daddy and I are going through a rough patch right now, and we're having a bit of a fight. But that has nothing to do with my love for you. I knew it. I could hear the relief in his voice. I told Lisa that Daddy was making things up. He's been so strange lately. He's always angry, yelling at Mom. He says he can't get a good job because of you. I closed my eyes, feeling endlessly tired. Edwin wasn't just forbidding me to see my grandchildren. He was vilifying me in their eyes, blaming me for all his problems. Your dad's upset about work, I said gently. Sometimes adults say hurtful things when they're angry, but it'll pass, you'll see. Grandma, can I come over to your house? Jason asked. We're going to a museum near your house on Saturday. I can say I'm going to the library afterward and drop by. Lisa wants to too, but she's afraid Daddy will find out and fight. I froze, not knowing what to say. On the one hand, I was madly eager to see my grandchildren. On the other hand, teaching them to deceive their parents didn't seem right. Jason, honey, I began gently. I'd really like to see you, but maybe I should talk to Mom first. She wouldn't mind, I think. No! His voice became frightened. Mom can't know. She'll tell Daddy everything, and he'll forbid us to leave the house at all. Please, Grandma, I miss your chocolate chip cookies so much. I hesitated. Morality said that you can't go against your parents' wishes, even if they're wrong. But my heart was breaking for my grandchildren. Okay, I said at last. I'll be home all day Saturday. Come when you can, and make sure you tell me where you are so your parents don't worry. I'll tell them I'm at the library, Jason assured me. I really do have a report to give, so it's almost not cheating. Oh, the bell for class. Bye, Grandma. See you Saturday. He disconnected, and I sat there, holding the phone to my ear and trying to comprehend what had happened. Was I doing the right thing by agreeing to a secret meeting with my grandson? Wouldn't it exacerbate the conflict with Edwin if he found out? But how could I refuse a child who is so eager to see me? Is everything all right? Rowan's voice snapped me out of my reverie. He was standing next to my desk, looking concerned. You look upset. That was my grandson, I said quietly. He called secretly from his parents. He wants to come visit me on Saturday, and I agreed, even though I know Edwin has forbidden the children to see me. Rowan sat down on the edge of my desk. It's a difficult situation, but I think you did the right thing. Children shouldn't have to suffer because of adult conflicts. What if Edwin finds out? I looked at him worriedly. He already accuses me of every mortal sin. If he finds out I'm seeing my grandchildren in secret, he'll go crazy. Then be careful. Rowan squeezed my hand lightly. And remember, you're not alone. I'm on your side, no matter what happens. I smiled gratefully at him. His support meant more to me than I was willing to admit. Rowan had been my rock, my anchor in these difficult times. And yet the guilt wouldn't let go of me. I was torn between my new feelings for Rowan and the pain of conflict with my son. How do I reconcile these two parts of my life? Was it even possible? Or would I have to choose between happiness with Rowan or peace with Edwin? Saturday's meeting with Jason went great. We baked his favorite chocolate chip cookies, played board games, and just talked. Grandson told me about school, about his friends, about his little sister Lisa, who missed me so much but was afraid to disobey her father. And of course, about the situation at home. Dad's always jumpy, Jason said, carefully cutting a star out of cookie dough. He's always calling about work and then he gets angry and yells. Mom cries at night thinking we can't hear. It made my heart ache to hear him say that. So Edwin still hasn't found a job. No wonder he's even angrier. But using the children as a weapon against me was too much even for him. Time flew by, and soon it was time for Jason to go home. I gave him a box of cookies for Lisa and Pamela, gave him a big hug goodbye, and told him to be careful. Don't tell Dad you were at my place, I reminded him. And don't call me from my home phone. Don't call at all if you want to meet. Just send a message to my email account in the school library. Jason nodded gravely. In his 12th, he seemed more mature than one might expect. Apparently, the stressful environment at home had made him grow up faster. After seeing my grandson off, I sat by the window for a long time, watching the November twilight fade. I felt uneasy. Meeting Jason had brought both joy and pain. The joy of being able to see him, and the pain of realizing how children suffer because of adult conflict. Monday at work, I was still reeling from seeing my grandson. Told Rowan, who, as usual, stopped by to say hello in the morning. Glad you could see each other, he said. But the situation is still wrong. Children shouldn't have to lie to their parents and live in constant fear. I know, I sighed. But what can I do? Edwin won't make contact, won't answer calls or texts. I even thought about contacting a lawyer about my grandmother's rights to communicate with her grandchildren. Maybe we should try talking to Pamela, Rowan suggested. She seemed more reasonable. I wondered. Pamela was always polite to me, although she was a little distant. Maybe I should really try to make contact through her. I didn't have time to think about that option. The workday was packed to the brim. Several important clients, urgent courier delivery of documents, endless calls. By lunchtime, I felt as exhausted as a lemon. The office was unusually lively. The company had won a tender to service a large regional supermarket chain, and the employees were celebrating the success. A small buffet was organized in the cafeteria, and Rowan gave a congratulatory speech, thanking everyone for their contribution. "A special thank you to our receptionist, Miriam," he said, raising a glass of champagne. "Her professionalism and friendliness made an excellent impression on the client representatives. As they said, if even your receptionist is so competent and attentive, what can we say about the technicians?" Everyone applauded, and I felt the color flood my cheeks. I'm not used to public praise, especially from a manager. But it was nice to know that my work was appreciated. After the buffet, I returned to my desk when Edwin literally burst into the office. His face was red with anger, his hair disheveled, his eyes flashing with lightning. When he saw me, he abruptly changed direction and walked toward the reception desk. "So this is what you do to your family?" His voice shook with rage. "Turn my children against me? Teaching them to lie to their parents?" I looked around. There were several staff members in the lobby, all looking in our direction with surprise and curiosity. "Edwin, let's talk somewhere else," I said quietly. "This is not a conversation to be had in public. I have nothing to hide." He raised his voice even more. "Let everyone know what you're really like. A manipulator and a hypocrite." I felt the blood drain from my face. Had Jason really let it slip? Or had Edwin somehow found out about our meeting? "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Don't pretend." He slammed his fist on the counter. "Jason confessed everything. He said he was at your house on Saturday, that you baked cookies and played games, and that you told him not to tell anyone about it. You're teaching my son to lie to me." By this point, a small crowd of staff had gathered around us. I could see their shocked faces, hear the whispers behind me. The humiliation was unbearable. "Edwin, stop it," I said firmly. "Yes, Jason came to see me because he missed his grandmother, because you forbade the children to see me for no reason. What was I supposed to do? Deny my own grandson?" "You were supposed to talk to me," he screamed. "Ask my permission." "I tried." I raised my voice now. "I called you dozens of times, texted you, came home, and you wouldn't answer the door. How could I talk to you if you avoided all contact?" Edwin looked at me with hatred. In that moment, he looked so much like his father that it took my breath away. The same look, the same grimace of contempt, the same way of hovering over the other person, trying to intimidate. "What's going on here?" Rowan's voice was suddenly loud. He came out of his office, attracted by the noise. "Edwin, what are you doing here?" "I came to talk to my mother," my son snapped at me. "Or is family talk forbidden in your company?" "Scandals and insults are forbidden," Rowan replied calmly. "If you want to talk to Miriam, do it on your own time and somewhere else." "Oh, so she's Miriam now?" Edwin grimaced. "What tenderness. Does everyone know by now that you're sleeping with my mother, Tall Madge? That's why you fired me?" There was dead silence in the hall. I felt the color flood my face with shame and anger. How could he do that? How could he say that in front of all my coworkers? "Edwin Holt," Rowan's voice turned icy. "You are on private property uninvited and insulting the company's employees. If you don't leave the building immediately, I will call security and the police." "Don't bother," Edwin snorted contemptuously. "I'm leaving now. I just want everyone to know that this woman," he pointed at me, "destroyed my family. First, she turned my father against me, then she seduced my boss to get me fired, and now she's turning my children against me. That's who she really is." Something inside me broke. All these years I've kept quiet, tolerated, forgiven. First Brian with his humiliation, then Edwin with his selfishness and callousness. I pretended that everything was normal, that I was happy in the role of the eternal victim, ready to do anything for my family. But now, standing in front of my son, who had publicly insulted and humiliated me, I realized I couldn't and wouldn't stay silent anymore. "Enough," my voice sounded unexpectedly firm. "I'm tired of your lies, Edwin. Tired of being the whipping boy. If you want everyone to know the truth, please, I'll tell you. I looked around at the silent employees. My son grew up in a family where his father constantly humiliated and insulted his mother, where my every word or action was ridiculed or criticized, where I worked a part-time job to pay for his education while his father spent money on his hobbies and mistresses. I kept quiet and endured, for Edwin's sake, for him to grow up in a complete family. And what did I get in return? I looked again at my son, who stood as if struck by thunder. When I retired and faced financial difficulties, do you know what my son said to me? I'm not going to feed an extra mouth. An extra mouth is what I had become to him. A woman who had given him her whole life. An extra mouth. And he offered me a job here, not out of caring, but to get rid of the guilt and obligation to help my mother. Tears came to my eyes, but I held them back with an effort of will. This was no time for weakness. And when I got the job, he accused me of seducing his boss. I'm 67 years old. I have arthritis and blood pressure, so what's temptation? But it's easier for Edwin to blame his mother for all his sins than to admit that he was fired for his own behavior. And now he won't let me see my grandchildren, the last joy of my life. He's the one destroying the family, not me. There was such silence in the hall that you could have heard a pin drop. Everyone looked at Edwin and me, not knowing how to react to this family drama unfolding before their eyes. Edwin turned pale, his lips quivering with rage. You've always had a way of making yourself look like a victim. Always. Poor, miserable Miriam, always suffering from an evil husband and an ungrateful son. And you manipulate everyone around you, making them feel guilty. That's enough, Edwin. Rowan came closer and stood beside me. Your mother is not a manipulator. She's an honest, straightforward, and kind person. And if you can't see that, then you're the problem, not her. Oh, of course, Edwin laughed bitterly. Protecting your mistress. How noble. Miriam is not my mistress, Rowan replied calmly. She is my friend. And I'm not defending her because we have a relationship, but because I see how unfairly you treat her. How her own son is repeating his father's mistakes, hurting the woman who sacrificed her whole life for him. Edwin shifted his gaze from me to Rowan and back again. Then he shook his head. You're both crazy. And you know what? I don't care. You can live your lives any way you want, but don't go near my kids, ever. He turned and walked quickly toward the exit. I stared after him, feeling a strange mixture of pain and relief. The pain of realizing that I had just publicly severed my relationship with my only son, and relief that I'd finally told the truth, that I'd stopped pretending everything was okay. Rowan touched my arm gently. Everything okay? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Around us, the crowd of employees was slowly dispersing. Some were going back to work. Some were quietly discussing what they'd seen. I could feel their eyes on me, sympathetic, confused, curious. Let's go to my office, Rowan suggested. You need to come to your senses for a while. I let him lead me away from the prying eyes. In my office, Rowan sat me in a chair, poured water from a carafe, and sat across from me. You're good, he said, looking me in the eye. Not everyone dares to tell the truth, especially when it hurts so much. I don't know if I did the right thing, I admitted. Maybe I shouldn't have brought my family's problems out in the open, but I just couldn't take it. I'd kept quiet for too long, and I'd been patient for too long. Sometimes silence just makes the problem worse, Rowan said. Edwin needed to hear the truth about himself for a long time. Maybe it would make him think. I don't think so, I grinned bitterly. He's too much like his father, never admitting his own mistakes, always blaming others. We were silent for a moment. Sparse snowflakes swirled outside the window, the first snow of the year. Beautiful and a little sad, like my whole life lately. What are you going to do now? Rowan asked. I don't know, I answered honestly. Keep working, of course. Maybe try to contact Pamela directly. She's always been more reasonable than Edwin. Perhaps she'd let me see my grandchildren, if only secretly. Rowan nodded. Good plan. Also, I think you should move. Move? I looked at him in surprise. Move where? Closer to work, he said. Your house is on the other side of town, and you have a long commute. Besides, Edwin knows where you live, after today's scene. Who knows what he might think? I've been thinking. The thought of moving had never crossed my mind. The house I'd lived in had been mine for 25 years, since my divorce from Brian. My grandchildren had grown up in it, and every corner held memories. But Rowan was right. It wasn't safe to stay there now that my relationship with Edwin had gone sour. "You're probably right," I said. "But finding a new place isn't easy, especially at my age and on my budget." "I have an option," Rowan smiled slightly. "Remember the building with the apartments on Cedar Street? There's a small apartment on the second floor. Clean, bright, overlooking the park. And only a 15-minute walk from the office." "Sounds wonderful." I couldn't help but smile back. "But it must be expensive." "Not as expensive as you think." He paused. I I could help with the down payment, if you'd let me, of course." I was embarrassed. Accepting financial help from Rowan didn't seem right. We weren't family, not even close friends, just old acquaintances who'd met by chance 50 years later. "It's very generous of you," I said, "but I can't accept such a gift." "It's not a gift," he countered. "Think of it as an investment in the future, our future together, if you don't mind." I froze, not sure I understood what he was saying. "What do you mean?" Rowan stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the falling snow. Then he turned to me. "Miri, I don't know how to say this without sounding like a ridiculous old man with pipe dreams. But ever since the day you came to the interview, I feel like my life has made sense again. It's like a part of me that's been asleep all these years is suddenly awake." He paused, choosing his words. "I'm not suggesting a romantic relationship. We're both too old for that. But friendship, intimacy, mutual support, isn't that what two lonely people need in their old age?" I remained silent, shocked by his words. This was not the conversation I'd expected after the scandal with Edwin. "I realize this isn't the best time to talk like this," Rowan continued. "You're upset, shocked, but I want you to know that you're not alone. You have me. And I'm going to do everything I can to help you through this difficult time." Rowan. I didn't know what to say. "I appreciate your kindness, I really do. But I don't want to be a burden. I don't want you to feel obliged to look after me just because we knew each other when we were young." "A burden?" He looked at me in surprise. "Miri, you will never be a burden to me. You are a strong, intelligent, independent woman. You don't need tutelage. But even the strongest people need support sometimes. And I want to be there for you when you need it. Like you'll support me when I need it." His words touched me to the core. How long had it been since someone had spoken to me like that? To see me not as a helpless old woman in need of pity, but as an equal, a person worthy of respect and care? "Thank you," I said quietly, "for everything. For work, for support, for understanding. You have no idea how much it means to me." "I have a rough idea." He smiled softly. "And I have a suggestion, or rather two suggestions." I looked at him questioningly. "One, let's look at this apartment on Cedar Street. No strings attached, just to see it. If you like it, great. If not, we'll keep looking." "Okay," I agreed. "And the second?" Rowan took a deep breath as if gathering his wits. "Remember when you were young, you said you dreamed of traveling? To see the world?" I nodded, not sure where he was going with this. "I have a trip to Europe planned for Christmas," he said. 2 weeks, London, Paris, Rome. I'd like you to come with me." I froze, not believing my ears. Europe? The trip I dreamed of all my life? And with Rowan, the man who had become closer to me than anyone else in the past few months? "Yeah, I don't know what to say," I mumbled. "This is so sudden." "Don't answer now." He held up a hand. "Think about it. It's a big decision, I realize. But I want you to know that I'll be happy if you say yes. And I promise I'll do everything I can to make this trip unforgettable for you." I looked at him, at his kind gray eyes, at the wrinkles in the corners of his lips, at his gray beard, and I felt something warm spill into my chest. Not passion, not romantic love, something deeper and calmer. A feeling that I'd finally found my place. My man. It's been 3 months since that memorable day when Edwin caused a scandal in the office. A lot had changed in that time. I'd moved into that very apartment on Cedar Street, small but cozy, overlooking a snow-covered park. I sold the old house and had enough money for a down payment, so I didn't need Rowan's help. He helped with the move, though, hiring movers and unpacking boxes of my stuff. Relations with Edwin remained strained, He never called, never apologized. But I did get in touch with Pamela. One day she came to my workplace when Edwin was at a job interview. He still hadn't found a full-time job, but he was still working temporary part-time jobs. I don't agree with the way Edwin is treating you, she said. The children miss you, and I miss you too. You were always more than a mother-in-law to me. We agreed that the grandchildren would come to see me when Edwin was at work. Pamela swore she wouldn't tell him, and I promised not to turn the children against their father. And so it went. Jason and Lisa came over once a week after school, and we spent a few happy hours together. Work at TechnoSafe went on as usual. After the scandal with Edwin, I was afraid that my coworkers would look at me askew, talk about me behind my back. But the opposite happened. Many people expressed their support for me. Some even shared their stories about difficult relationships with their relatives. I felt part of the team, and it was wonderful. I also agreed to a trip to Europe with Rowan. We were flying out in a week, tickets bought, hotels booked, itinerary planned. I was counting down the days until our trip like a kid counting down Christmas. Nervous? Rowan asked me as we ate lunch at a cafe near the office. A little, I admitted. I've never been abroad. I'm afraid I'll mess it up with my inexperience. You won't ruin anything, he squeezed my hand reassuringly. We'll be together, and I'll show you everything. I promise it will be the most wonderful Christmas of your life.